All right, I'd now like to welcome on a very special guest from Barstool Sports. It is EBo. EBo, what's up?
What's going on, Blake? It's great to be here.
Yeah,
Uh,
you've let us down. Speaking of Barstool Sports, you can find EBo on the Pick 'em Podcast, where he's been an incredibly disappointing gambler so far this season.
that is true up until about 4 weeks ago. I'm 3-1 on my last four, so I've started to cook a little bit.
Starting to
Started,
get hot.
yeah, I'm not at the bottom. I haven't been at the bottom the entire season. That's the only thing.
Yeah, now's the perfect time to have you on. We talked about you coming on this show preseason, and you were moving to Chicago, had a million different things going on. So we delayed it, and we had faith in your JMU Dukes. You went to JMU, you're a JMU guy, and we both had faith in them having a big year. And we circled a couple spots late in the calendar and said if JMU's in contention, if they're dominating late in the season, we'll come on and we'll have a JMU week. And they have not lost a game. They've done exactly that. So here you are.
Yeah, I think I remember texting you that we were going to do the JMU show because we will dominate. And honestly, this FBS football thing is kind of easy. I don't want to sound cocky, but what 16-3 since jumping to the next level, it's been pretty fun to be a JMU fan, minus all the NCAA sanction.
Yeah, all the NCAA bullshit, which we can definitely get to when we talk about the JMU game. But before we get to all that, the first college football playoff rankings did come out this week, and my favorite thing about the college football playoff, like the first and even second, even third, when the first couple rankings come out, is people freaking out about like Ohio State being number one, and it's like, do they deserve to? It's like they still have to play Michigan. If they beat Michigan, then yes, they will deserve to be number one. And if they lose to Michigan, then they're out. So like, who cares? And my favorite thing is getting mad at the people that overreact, but then still having to give my opinion as well.
Yeah, getting very meta mad about other people getting mad. That's a chronic syndrome of anyone who's been online on Twitter for at least a decade. Is you don't actually get mad about things, you get mad about other people getting mad about things.
Yeah, people freak out about the college football playoff rankings. Like as a Washington guy this year, Washington got put behind Florida State. In my opinion, the Oregon win for Washington is a better win than Florida State's LSU win. I think Oregon's better than LSU. So I think Washington should have been four, Florida State should have been five as undefeated teams. And I easily could have gotten upset about it, but that's not what I got upset about. I got upset about, like you said, the things that other people were, and I was very upset at people being upset about the rankings.
Yeah, I mean the top five are all 8-0. You can't really take real any umbrage with any of them in any order unless you have like just I don't know, you're a delusional fan at some point. I mean, I guess you'll argue and argue and argue for your team, but I mean they're going to put those five teams in order 8-0. At least like one or two of them are going to catch a loss. We're guaranteed at least one loss in there, so doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
you're guaranteed Ohio State or Michigan knocking the other one out of the top four. And if you're Washington or even if you're Oregon or one of those Texas, if you win out, you'll get ahead of the team that lost between those two. So you just got to keep winning. There's only one thing that I had a slight issue with, and that was Oregon over Texas. I thought was weird. I think Oregon's probably a better team at the moment for sure, playing like the better team right now. But as two one-loss teams, both of them took a good loss. Like Oklahoma and Washington are both in the top 10, so both of those are good losses. But Alabama or Texas has the win over Alabama on the road, which you could still argue is the best win anybody has in the country. It's really the only one of those teams. Ohio State going to Notre Dame, maybe, but I don't think that's better because Ohio State beat Penn State at home. That was a big win. Florida State, LSU, that's on a neutral. Like when you look at the top teams, going to Tuscaloosa and winning still might be the best win that anybody has. And so them being behind Oregon, I thought was kind of weird, but again, that's probably going to
Especially
work itself out.
when you put 8-0 Florida State over Washington, you're basically saying do you think a neutral site victory is more valuable or a more like difficult game. Texas lost a game on a neutral site. Oregon lost a game on the road. It's maybe I guess actually no, yeah, that probably doesn't play as much effect as I thought it would. But I'm just trying to see how the committee weighs neutral site versus playing on the road. I mean, a neutral site is a more realistic environment for what the playoffs going to be. Like, you weight the neutral site games more than maybe playing on the road? I'm not sure. It's something they
Yeah.
might.
No, and again, it's like Oregon and Washington are probably going to play each other again in the Pac-12 championship game, and so one of those teams is going to lose, and Texas, if they win out, will get ahead of whichever team loses, and maybe. But it really just had me thinking, like, if Washington loses this week to USC and then wins out the rest of the way, or if Oregon wins out the rest of the way, just like kind of how they would weigh the Big 12 versus the Pac 12. It's pretty obvious that they have the Pac 12 ahead of the Big 12. And I
You
guess the
think a
only
one
kind of quote.
you think a one loss Big 12 champion is bottom of the ladder of the one loss champions? So we got like a
No,
Florida
if
State goes 12-1, Washington goes 12-1, or Oregon goes 12-1, wins the conference championship. Texas goes 12-1. You put Florida State and Oregon in over Texas, or you take a Texas?
I think if Florida State loses one, they would be the if everybody's a 12-1 conference champion, I would have it be, for example, Georgia, Michigan, Washington, Texas, and then Florida State would be on the outside. Because, like I said, I think, well, the one other interesting thing that I kind of did want to talk about is there is a scenario where I think those are the clear bottom two is the Big 12 and the ACC. I think the Pac 12 is above those two, whoever comes out of there, and the other two, Big 10 and SEC, obviously way above those. And so, what could be really interesting, Florida State should win out, honestly. They are going to be favorites in every game, but they do play Miami and they have to go to Florida the last game of the season. Like those are games they definitely could lose conceivably. And so if they are, and if Texas wins out, they'll be 12-1 conference champs with the win over Alabama. And Florida State, if they lose one but then still win the ACC championship, they'll be 12-1 conference champs with the win over LSU. Could this weekend's Alabama LSU game determine which one of those two would get into the playoff? Because then that's who has the better win,
Yeah,
Texas or
Alabama
Florida
runs the
State.
table. Yeah, if Alabama runs the table, Texas does, without a doubt, have the best win of anyone in the country. They'll have a road win at Alabama. Unless
Yeah,
they'll have
so
Michigan, I guess. You could consider that like a great win. But if you beat the SEC champ on the road, that's the best win in the country.
yeah, if you're a Texas fan, you just have to keep rooting for Alabama. Even if they win out and then the rest of the regular season lose to Georgia, that's still they're going to be 12-2, and the only teams they or 11-2, and the only teams they lost to were Georgia and Texas. So I think that would put you in good shape. But if LSU pulls the upset, then all of a sudden Florida State's resume gets a huge boost. So that's one very weird factor in this weekend's games that could end up being important later on. But that's really all I have on the college football playoff, unless there's
There was just
more
one
you
thing
have.
I thought was kind of interesting, and this is like the Ken Palm team that's this year. Is Arizona 7-1 against the spread. They're 5-3.
Mm-hmm.
Their only losses are Washington, USC in overtime, and Mississippi State on the road in overtime. Those are three incredible losses, if you want to call them that. You could probably make an argument that Arizona is a top 25 team in the country. They have a great chance to run the table the rest of the way, finish 9-3. I think you could see them finishing in that like 11 to 15 range in the final rankings of the season, final AP poll, something like that. Like they could sneak in to like a higher ranking by the end of the season. Like there could be in a little Premier Bowl game, 9-3, go 10-3, finish in the top 15. That is an interesting.
Yeah, no, they're a team I like a lot. I've gotten in on them finally. Like I was late to the game. The last couple of weeks, I finally got in, and I'm betting them this week, home dogs against UCLA. That's a good
Yeah.
spot.
I understand the committee not putting them in the top 25 with three losses, but I do believe they are a top 25, even maybe resume or team in the country.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more arguing you can do outside of the top 10 or top 15 of teams that probably should get more respect. Maybe Air Force should be higher up than they are. Them and JMU, honestly, have been the two best group of five teams for sure.
One
And
team that's sneaking in there is SMU. They're really fucking good. They just put the beat down last week. What was it, 69-3 or something like that?
yeah, 2 weeks
66.
in a row they've won by a lot because I bet
They're
them the week before that too.
they're
Yeah,
really
they
good.
beat Temple 55-0. 2 weeks ago. And then last week was 69-10. So 55-0, 69-10, their scores the last 2 weeks. So
Yeah, if you're Tulane,
yeah.
you think you came into the season thinking you got a team with the inside track to that group of five spot in the New Year's Six, and you might not even be the best team in your conference. SMU looks really, really good this year, so I'd be a little bit concerned. I think their only losses are at Oklahoma and um, TCU, I believe, just two Big 12 losses. That's it, but they could run the table.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, I think Air Force is probably in the driver's seat for that spot, but they could easily slip up and lose one. Yeah, that is SMU's only two losses are yeah, TCU and Oklahoma. Um, but we can go to JMU. Talking about JMU, that's the first game I have on the list. It's JMU week on this show, so we got to start with JMU. Um, the game lost a little bit of its excitement with Georgia State letting us down last week. I didn't bet that game or anything, and obviously I don't really care about the winner of Georgia Southern Georgia State, but I was rooting for Georgia State just knowing that we had this on the books, hoping that it would be a bigger game, but
Yeah.
still a big game. Georgia State's been really good this year. They've exceeded expectations for sure. They're 6-2 with that loss to Georgia Southern, but JMU's 8-0. And they're not allowed to be in the college football playoff rankings, right?
Yeah, so I believe that they're just going by NCAA bylaws, which basically is like if they're not eligible for the postseason, we're not going to consider them. But they said that if they did become eligible, they didn't even answer if they would consider them. They're like, we don't deal in hypotheticals around here, even though the whole college football playoff system is kind of built
It's
on
entirely
hypotheticals.
hypotheticals. Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting logic from the NCAA and college football playoff committee. But yeah, no, it's been awesome. It's kind of been the standard since I got to school in 2014, just kind of 10-win season after 10-win season. And yeah, it's nice to see that I don't look like a crazy person when for years I've been trying to tell people that we could compete. Like you let us move up to FBS, we'll compete with everyone. Like we'd be top of G5 immediately. We spent like a G5 team for the last 20 years and just been hiding in the CA waiting to pounce. And it's nice to see it come to fruition, you know?
Yeah. It's obviously working out better than I'm sure you even could have hoped for, even if it's you were talking shit. It's obviously been ridiculous though, how automatic it's been. It's been so easy for them. But the one thing I saw this week, and I'm sure again, you know more about this than me as a JMU guy, but is it true that if there are not enough bowl eligible teams that go 6-6, basically, that they could get bumped up into a bowl spot?
Yeah, so like the spots where the 5 and 7 teams sometimes backfill
Yeah.
is JMU would get those extra, or JMU and Jacksonville State would be the two teams considered before the 5 and 7 teams. But I'm not sure, I'm not an expert on this, if they would be considered like a 5 and 7 team or a 12-0 team or a 10 and
So
1 team or 11-1 team.
yeah,
That's
that was gonna be my question too. Is it like, oh, the 5-7 team would have gone into the Independence Bowl or whatever, so like that's where we're gonna slot you, or is it like, oh, now you're technically bowl eligible, so you just go into the pool with all the other bowl teams, and now you can play in whatever, like a legit bowl game? I don't know the
yeah.
answer to that
I don't
question
think
either.
we're eligible for a New Year's Six bowl, but it would be cool to play in like the Outback Bowl, you know, like
Yeah,
a
even like
SC
even like the
Outback
Cheez It
Bowl.
Bowl, like one of those, like December 28th, December 29th, December 30th, like one of those
Yeah,
bigger
like
games that matters
I don't
against like
I don't
a
want to be
an
playing
SEC team or something.
I don't want to be playing Ball State, a 5 and 7 Ball State on
Yeah.
December 5th. I do not want that. No, I don't think
No,
anyone
that's
wants that.
no, you'd rather just not play in the bowl and just be able to talk about how disrespected you were than to
Yeah.
have to deal with that. And no, the one article I read said like current projections have it that there won't be enough bowl eligible teams. So I don't know. We'll hold out hope for that, but only if that means you can actually play in a real bowl game, which maybe as it gets closer to the time,
Yeah.
somebody who knows more than
I mean,
us will.
the legislators ready to go to war. I mean, we're crossing party lines in Virginia to man an army against the NCAA. It's great. I mean, the one lady said she's ready to go to war, like bare arms. Let's do it. Take them to court. Western District of Virginia. Let's go.
Virginia has taken up arms against this country once before, and it did not work out.
It did not end well for.
Did not work out the first time.
It's not a battle against the Union.
Yeah, that's true. So, no, I mean, they have a huge, like, their case is great. The only case against them in court would just be like, you already knew the rules when you came, and so we don't have to change them. But like the fairness of the rules that make no sense in terms of if you were to debate that.
Yeah, and I understand they don't want teams jumping up and making the transition when they're not prepared, just as like a money grab. But JMU went up and played a full FBS schedule their first year. No one does that. Like no teams transitioning go up and play a full FBS schedule. They mix in some FCS games. And in their last year of FCS, they weren't even eligible to win the CAA because the CAA said, "Fuck you, you're leaving. You're not going to be our champion." So they've been screwed by about 3 years in a row now, and it's getting a little frustrating. It's lights at the end of the tunnel, but I'd like it to be a little sooner, you know?
Yeah. Well, we can focus on this week for now. They're going to Georgia State on the road. They're 5.5-point favorites. The over-under is 54.5. They early on in the season were playing a lot of really close games. Like you would watch their games and you would be like, they're clearly the better team, but like they just kind of would let inferior teams hang around and not really be able to put teams away. And then what week was it they made the change at quarterback that made the big difference in my mind?
For JMU?
Yeah.
Well, so what happened was we started a redshirt freshman first Bucknell week one. He kind of struggled, and they didn't really open up the offense really until about like week 4 for Jordan McLeod, who's been awesome transfer from Arizona. He's been incredible. And it's just like a nonstop cycle. I think there's a Cignetti system going on with quarterbacks. I mean, he's done an awesome job with Cole Johnson. And now Jordan McLeod and Todd Centeio last year. It's been great to see. Like the transformation over the course of the season has been awesome.
Yeah, and they've started to be better the last couple of weeks at putting teams away. They've been right in this range 3 times in the past few weeks. They were 5.5-point favorites at Utah State, won by 7, 5.5 points against Georgia Southern, and they blew them out. That was the one game I bet against JMU all year was Georgia Southern in that spot. It seemed like the perfect spot, and they blew the doors off of them. So, and then they were 5-point favorites against Marshall too, and won by 11. So this is like one of those numbers that like freaks people out, like a 5.5-point favorite, because it's like it is kind of like a dead zone in between 3 and 4 and 7, obviously. So some teams like are very bad at covering these types of numbers, but they've obviously shown that they can do it this year. And I mean, JMU is definitely a much better team. Their front 7 is ridiculous. It's like a Power 5 level front 7. Like they're going to be able to get after Georgia State and dominate the trenches for sure. And like you said, their offense has been clicking ever since, I guess, week 4, whenever. Yeah, I guess it wasn't the change at quarterback I was thinking, but just when they decided to be like, let's just open up the playbook, like the offense has been.
Since the Troy game, pretty much, they've been rolling on offense. It's been awesome.
Yeah. And so I guess the only thing is like for a team as they're getting down the stretch, long season, and there's seemingly no like prize at the end of like, we get to be conference champions, we get to go to this bowl game. The only thing in my mind that could like stop them is just motivation, basically. As somebody that's more like tapped in, do you think that could be an issue at all, or is this team kind of like we're just going to keep winning and dominating?
See, the thing is, Cignetti is a true blue Saban guy. Like he's like, we're going to go out there, and the only thing to do is go 1-0 every week. We're going to kick the shit out of the person that's across the line from you. You're going to dominate your matchup, and we're going to win. That's the only thing he gives a fuck about. He doesn't care about bowl games. Doesn't care about national championships. Just winning. And I think like you were saying with the front 7, this is maybe one of the best front 7s in the country. It just the fact that it has a JMU on it makes it not the brand isn't as prestigious. Like there are 4 guys that are going to be playing on the defensive line this weekend that are legitimate all Sun Belt players. Maybe three of the 4 make it on a first team. Yeah, I think we do a good job of dominating Georgia State. I think this is a tough matchup for them with needing to run the football. Any team that like needs to really run the football is going to struggle against us. It's really going to come down to whether or not the young guys on the outside for JMU can win their matchups one-on-one. But yeah, I like this with the points this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even look into it that much. I was like, basically, I did 30 seconds of looking at some numbers, and I was just like, I mean, it's JMU week. I'm betting JMU. I'm laying the points. I'm laying 5.5. There's no way JMU doesn't cover on JMU week. So
Yeah.
that's
We have they haven't never covered on JMU week,
no,
or not
they
covered.
are undefeated on JMU week.
Yeah.
They've
I
never
saw we didn't lay the
lost.
20.5 last week. That was tough. 3 points.
No, no, I was not on them last week, luckily. I've been good. I've stayed away in a couple spots, and the only time I bet against them and lost was the Georgia Southern game. I've definitely won more than I've lost, and now it's JMU week, so I don't see anything going wrong. Um, Definitely take the lay the points with JMU. I it is They do fit in nicely with our big games of the weekend category. It's five games of ranked team versus ranked team, and then JMU Georgia State. Those are the six big games of the weekend.
I mean, all college football fans know that you got to throw out the records when JMU and Georgia State play. I mean, that's a premier college football rivalry.
Yeah, I saw some people online were pushing for game day to go there. I don't know if is
Yeah, I guess
game day's going to Bama or to USC. I actually don't
I'm
know
not
the
really
answer.
sure. I used to be
Probably to
really big on
Bama.
that. Yeah, JMU got
Uh,
game day twice when I was there. I don't need any more game days. I'm all
yeah,
set on game days.
I had one game day. I had game day my freshman year at South Carolina, Missouri, and we lost, which is fitting.
Yeah,
Um,
Jamie's first game day was the day that Vad Lee, who the week before had run for 275 yards, passed for 275, only player in NCAA history to do that. He like halfway through the game like tore his ACL, was out for the season. So
so
yeah,
we don't want game
we don't even
day.
want game day. Like
It's bad.
we don't
Both
care
of our
about.
programs are struggle with game day. But
We
yeah,
don't care.
I used to be like I like waiting for that tweet to drop about like where game day was headed and knowing and it was I tweeted something last week when they were like had Lil Nas X coming on and it's like nothing against Lil Nas X, but like I don't think he's a huge football guy. Like he can do whatever he wants with his music and dressing however he wants and doing whatever he wants. But I just don't think he's a football guy. And imagining him and the bits Pat McAfee would be doing with him, I was like, I just can't do it. I literally can't watch it. So I had to stay away. Um, but I would guess they're going to Bama over USC. But who knows? But the next game on our list is Bedlam. It's the last Bedlam ever for
Sad,
now. The last
sad.
scheduled one, the last conference one for until conferences realign again, which is definitely possible. But Oklahoma is a 6 point road favorite. The over under is 61. And this is another game that looked like it was going to be a much bigger matchup than it was. Still huge, obviously, for a lot of reasons. But Oklahoma lost last week against Kansas. They now have one loss. But Oklahoma State keeps winning. Oklahoma State is on fire. They've covered 4 games in a row. Their offense is out of control. Their running back, Ollie Gordon, is this kid who just appeared out of nowhere. Like his numbers the first couple weeks of the season. I mean, he was somebody I don't think unless you're an Oklahoma State fan, you knew who he was before the season. The first couple games of the season, his numbers are not even okay. They're kind of bad. And then all of a sudden, he just started busting out for like 200 yards a game. And the way he's been playing the last couple weeks would be like a Heisman season if he did that over the course of an entire season. How ridiculous he's been. So it's been a really weird season for Oklahoma State. They did not have high expectations going into this season. Spencer Sanders transferred to Ole Miss. It was supposed to be kind of like a rebuilding kind of year for them. And they just kind of found something the last few weeks, especially on offense, and just been rolling. Whereas Oklahoma, the last 2 weeks since the Texas win, were a 2 point conversion away from going to overtime with UCF, barely survived there, and then losing to Kansas. So kind of in weird spots where Oklahoma is definitely the better team, but they have to be feeling pretty down on themselves after that loss last week. And Oklahoma State's got to be riding super high the way they've been playing the last few weeks and super confident going into this game.
Yeah, I mean Oklahoma could very easily have 3 losses on their schedule right now. I mean they are very close to Brett Venables being on the hot seat. Like we are not far off from that reality. But I do think this is like a Oklahoma spot. Like everyone saw them lose to Kansas. Like they're like Oklahoma season's done. Blah blah blah. They're like I heard people say that Oklahoma and Texas aren't going to make it to the Big 12 championship game today.
I've heard those takes, yeah.
Certain people I work with. So I'm not buying any of that. I'm in Oklahoma. I am going to miss Bedlam. Like I have a very vivid memory in 2021 being at a bar with my friends, just seeing Caleb Williams just sitting on the bench sad. Like we'll never get those moments again. It's very sad.
You know, I have distinct memories of the same game. I was at an engagement party for one of my college roommates that night in DC, and we were out in your neck of the woods in Nova at some bar, watching that game. And yeah, sad Caleb Williams. So I'm gonna miss Bedlam a lot as well. But I don't know. I've hated this Oklahoma team all year. I was so confident in Texas going into that game, and they just, I mean, Quinn Ewers basically just like shit his pants for the first like 3 offensive drives, and then after that, Texas was by far the better team the rest of the game, and then just kind of poor clock management and coaching from Sark down the stretch let Oklahoma have that last drive to go win the game. But Texas, in my mind, is still much better than Oklahoma. And like you said, they easily could have lost to UCF. They lost to Kansas. They, I've been against them the last 2 weeks since that Texas game. Bet against them with UCF and Kansas, and they've been easy winners. And I don't know. I'm sticking on the train and going with Oklahoma State. I'm not a Venables guy at all. And in a spot like this in college football where the players are doing like the roller coaster of emotions where they are on top of the world, literally getting tattoos after they beat Texas, like they just won the national championship. And then you go lose to Kansas and it's like, oh shit, like we're in a really bad spot right now. What you need in college football is a guy, like a head coach that's like going to keep guys focused and motivated. And like you're talking about with Signetti being like, last week, erase it from your brain. What's coming up later this season, erase it from your brain. Like, this is the only game that matters. Based on what's happened in the 2 games after Texas, he didn't do that because they were not focused at all in those 2 games. They were the much more talented team against UCF and Kansas and didn't show up for either of those games. And so now responding the opposite way after a bad loss, I just don't have faith in their coaching staff, and I do have faith in Mike Gundy, who I think I was listening to Pick 'em this morning. Very underrated head coach Mike Gundy that a lot of people don't know
really
about.
Talk about. Yeah, not a lot of people know the guy that has had a job for 15, 20 years. He's very good. Not a lot of people know.
No, he gets disrespected. He's under the radar. The guy that goes shirtless with the mullet at center court of basketball games and has one of the most famous rants speeches in college football history. Goes under the radar, and he's so under the radar, some people might not know. I pulled this stat. He is 64, 48, and 4 against the spread at home in his career, which is 57%. It's like in the top 10 best of any school in the country since he took over there, which was 2005. And obviously, most of the teams that are up there with him have not had the same coach over that whole stretch. So he's just been so consistently good for so long, and we were joking about it, but he really is like so consistently solid, and in these spots at home, he's really good, and I just trust him more than Venables to have the team ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, I just think Oklahoma's just going to Jimmy's and Joe's them this week, but
They
I'll
could.
play over in that game. I don't think anyone's going to be playing any defense.
No. Well, and it's Bedlam. If you take a Bedlam under,
you can't take the Bedlam under.
It's criminal. But another big game in the Big 12 is Kansas State going to Texas. Kansas State's a 4-point dog. The total's 49 and a half. In Kansas State, like Oklahoma State, is another team that's kind of unlocked something the last few weeks. Their offense has been on fire. They are now using like a second quarterback in certain goal line packages and short yardage situations and getting really creative offensively. And their defense has been dominant. I'm going to pull up the scores really quick of their last three games were 41-0 against Houston, 41-3 against TCU, and 38-21 against Texas Tech. That's their last three games. So they've been dominant performances, but those three teams that they've beaten in my mind are like not serious teams. Like TCU and Texas Tech has been so disappointing, and Houston is not good. So it's a weird thing where they have been on fire, and I'm sure they're feeling good going into this game, especially with Quinn Ewers being out. I'm sure they think they can win this game. But I'm not totally sold on their like love that they're getting. I think if anything, I guess I'm kind of giving away my pick for this game, but I think people have kind of caught on to their scores the last couple of weeks and been like, oh my God, Kansas State's so good. They're killing everybody. And Quinn Ewers isn't playing. Like they're going to beat Texas. I think if we had a healthy Quinn Ewers and this was the Kansas State team that lost to Oklahoma State a month ago, this line would be like 10. And instead it's 4. And so in my mind, I think you're getting like an all-time discount with Texas in this spot. I think people are still kind of low on them since the Oklahoma loss. And in my mind, like this is the defense that went to Alabama and basically dominated Alabama in the trenches. This is the offense that was just like, even though it was with a different quarterback, like just launching balls over the top against Alabama's secondary that has like been dominant ever since then. And I think it's like kind of a disrespectful line, and I think Texas is going to win the game. I'm a Malik Murphy guy too. I going into this season, I talked about how the two teams I liked, Washington was one, but the other two teams I liked nationally were Texas and LSU because I thought they both had two different quarterbacks that could potentially go all the way because they're so good. For LSU, if you followed me on Twitter the first like 3 weeks of the season, all I did was ask for Jaden Daniels to get benched for Garrett Nussmeier, and now he's going to win the Heisman. So that's kind of funny. But the other one was Malik Murphy at Texas. He's like a total freak athlete and has like a cannon of an arm. He's obviously not as like experienced as Quinn Ewers. Hasn't played in a ton of big games, but I think talent wise, he's raw talent, just as good as Quinn Ewers. There's a reason he's playing like and not Arch Manning. When Quinn Ewers got hurt, there's so many people that were like, wait, Arch Manning's not the person playing now? It's like, no, Arch Manning's 17 years old. He is not the person coming into play.
High
Malik
school junior.
Murphy's yeah, like he should be in high school. Like he is 17 years old. Malik Murphy is a freak. And last week his numbers weren't great against BYU, but they just dominated. They really didn't need him to do much. Like they called a very conservative game. We're clearly just trying to get him comfortable. He made a couple of really big throws. I was watching a lot of that game, and he looked really good, even though the numbers aren't totally there. So I think the Texas defense is so good. I think they're going to step up, rise to the occasion here, and Texas is going to win and cover the 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really bad matchup for Kansas State, right? Like Texas, maybe outside maybe Georgia, best run defense in all of Power Five last 2 seasons. They've been unbelievable. They finally got the athletes in there with Sark. Bad match for Kansas State. I think they're going to need Will Howard to play some hero ball. And I don't think the gap between Quinn Ewers and Malik Henry is 6 points. Like I know you're saying, like if Quinn Ewers was playing this game, this line is 11, maybe 12 points. Like, do you think that that's not like those two players aren't 8 points in difference? Malik Henry is a very competent quarterback. I think this is Texas like bully ball. Like we see a blowout. I don't think this game's close.
Yeah, and Texas is also one of the best rushing teams. Like they have maybe the best running back group in the country, in like the top 5 running back groups in the country. Like they're going to be able to run the ball. Like it's not going to be like, oh, Malik, you have to go do everything yourself. Like it's going to be a really balanced effort. I think they're the better team in like every aspect. They're at home. It's a huge game. And when you look at the rest of their schedule, I just want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. This is like their last, yeah, this is like their last real test. They play TCU and Iowa State the next 2 weeks, and then they end with Texas Tech at home, who's been super disappointing this season. So like those are 3 games that you're pretty comfortable with them winning. So I think they kind of look at their schedule and are like, if we win this one, Quinn's going to come back and is supposed to be back in a week or 2 after this game. It's like, if we can get this win, we're going to get our revenge spot against Oklahoma. We're going to get a play for a spot in the college football playoff, technically. So I think you get a huge effort out of them in this game. So we both like the Horns.
And
in
at
the
home,
SEC,
I mean, they've been unbelievable last 2 years. Outside of the TCU game last year, they've been unbelievable at home. They just dominate teams. So I like them a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Then there's 2 huge games in the SEC. Basically, the SEC East and the SEC West both get decided this week unless somebody gets upset by some weird teams after this. SEC West is much more interesting. The SEC East game, even though it kind of decides the division, is a 15.5-point spread for Georgia at home against Missouri. The total is 54.5. It's been a weird season for Georgia. Early on in the season, Carson Beck didn't look very good. Their team overall didn't look very good. They like let UAB play them close for a while. South Carolina jumped out to an early lead against them and got a huge cover.
I don't want to make any accusations, but you guys might have had their signs. Did you have their signs? You might have had the signs in the first half.
I'm not allowed to share that information.
No one's brought that up. No one's brought that up, but they might have had their signs. Go ahead.
Yeah, Shane Beamer and Connor Stallions are close friends, as everybody knows, which is why we beat Tennessee and Clemson last year. Also, if it came out, I don't think that's true. I think that's like, this whole thing is nuts. And I think that's like one step further, even that like they were telling other teams how to beat Tennessee and Clemson. Like,
it was 7 o'clock in a Big Ten game, and he was wearing sunglasses. I mean,
no, you're right.
Nothing is beyond the realm of reasonability.
No, you're right. But what I was going to say is, even if this whole thing gets blown up and text messages, emails come out, and it's like, oh my God, South Carolina, I don't care. Like, I experienced those games when they happened and had the time of my life. Like, I don't care if retroactively we had their signs. It would not matter to me at all. But yeah, Georgia looked really bad. And then they had that Kentucky game that everybody was like, oh, this could be the spot where Kentucky's looking really feisty and Georgia just blew them out of the water. And ever since then, they've kind of turned it off and turned it back on, depending on who they're playing, basically. If they think it's a game where they need to give their best effort, like last week against Florida, they'll just dominate. But I still don't think their defense is where it's been the last couple of years. I think the offense has like finally found its stride. I think they've opened up the playbook more for Carson Beck. And I think in a weird way, the Brock Bowers injury has like helped Carson Beck in some ways. Cause I think Brock Bowers was such like a safety blanket where it's like, just kind of like run a conservative play call, throw like a 5-yard slant to Brock Bowers and just let him run people over and pick up first downs. Whereas now they're doing like much more creative things on offense to find like other ways to get other people the ball and make things easier on Carson Beck. So I think he's actually looked better, weirdly, since Brock Bowers went out. Whether that's just because he's keeps getting better as the season goes on, or if those things are correlated, I don't know, I guess. But their offense is really good. They've put up a lot of points recently, but their defense is still, I mean, I think it was last season, not 2 years ago, but last season's defense, that it was like they hadn't given up. They gave up like one offensive touchdown like as of like week 10, they'd only allowed like one touchdown or something. I don't remember what it's something ridiculous where they have had UAB, Auburn, Vanderbilt, and Florida have all put up 20 plus on them, which like UAB and Vanderbilt and even this year's Auburn team, like their offense is a joke. Like those teams putting up 20 plus would have never happened against Georgia defenses the past couple of years. So I still don't think this Georgia team is quite where the two national championship teams were, just because the defense isn't as dominant, but the offense is looking really good.
Yeah, and I think Missouri is a team that actually can surprisingly move the ball through the air. Like they can.
Mm-hmm.
Cook's been great this year. Outside of that LSU game, they've been awesome. They obviously had the big win over Kansas State we talked about earlier, but I think Missouri can keep this within the number. I think neither team really has that many explosive plays in a run game. I think we kind of shortened this game up a little bit and kind of advantageous for a team that's catching 15.5. I like Missouri plus 15.5.
Yeah, I like Missouri and the over actually. I really think that Georgia's defense is still not quite there, and I think this is the best offense they've played maybe all year. The best offense they've played in a long time, at least. Like this is a, I think Missouri's offense is better than Florida, better than Auburn, better than like those teams we're talking about that managed to still put up some points against them. Um, and I actually look, Missouri's offense has scored 30 plus 6 weeks in a row, which is kind of ridiculous. Like their offense has been playing really, really well. And that's against a couple of good defenses mixed in there. And I think Georgia eventually will find a way to win the game. I really wish this game was at Missouri. I think it could be like an actual like upset possibility if they were going on the road. I think at home they just will find a way to win this game. But I think both teams are going to put up a lot of points. I was trying to just like figure things out in my head, so I literally just came up with what I thought the final score would be, and I came up with 35-24 as my final score, which would be Missouri inside the number and the over. And I I went in being like I those are the two bets that I like, and then I thought about other things and wrote down a final score and was like, okay, that's those two numbers. So I like Missouri and the over.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Missouri has a chance to win this game, but I think they can stay inside 15.5 for sure.
Yeah, and what we saw in the because I had the over in the Georgia Florida game too, and as Georgia was starting to like pull away a little bit, I was like, oh man, like this is on track to be so good for the over, but I'm worried Georgia's going to like take a 2 touchdown lead and just kind of like sit on the ball like we've seen Georgia do in the past. And they didn't do that. And maybe that is just because it was against Florida and it's like a rivalry game and they hate Florida, but they just kept throwing, kept trying to move the ball down the field and kept scoring. So I I feel like both of these teams are going to go back and forth more than people would think. Um, but that's the SEC East game. The SEC West game is LSU Alabama. Alabama is only a 3-point favorite. The total is 61. This opened at like 4.5, and it's been bet like all LSU this week, all the way down to 3. So I bet two um, like game of the year look ahead lines before the season started. And just by coincidence, they were both this week. I like looked through, they had them for like 6 weeks of games, and the only two that I liked were this week. One of them was LSU against Alabama, and I got 7.5, LSU plus 7.5 in this game. So I'm holding that ticket, which is pretty nice. And hopefully the CLV doesn't just disappear into thin air like it usually does. And I cover that game that I bet the game of the year ticket on, but I really do think LSU is going to win this game. I have been a sucker for this LSU team all year, so this could easily be like Alabama comes out and just shoves it on them, and I'm wrong. But their defense has been so bad. I know how bad their defense has been, but it has gotten a little bit better the last couple of weeks. They haven't played like great competition, but they have at least shown some life on defense the last couple of weeks. And the offense, in my mind, is the best in the country. They're ridiculous. They can score so effortlessly. Their receivers are so good. Jaden Daniels, like I was saying earlier, has like shocked me with how good he's been this year. He obviously could run like the zone read, great, was very mobile, could like consistently hit like a pass here and there, but his completion percentage wasn't great last year, and he couldn't hit the deep ball at all last year. That was like the biggest fault in his game was LSU had these awesome receivers and they would get space and he would just totally miss them on deep balls. And that's why I wanted them to start Garrett Nussmeier this year, because that's like all he does is just launch deep balls and hit those guys. But Jaden Daniels has been amazing this year. If LSU didn't have two losses, I think he would be the Heisman favorite, honestly, just based on his numbers. I don't think he will win, especially if they lose this game. But I think LSU's offense is just going to cook, even against Alabama's defense that has been really solid. And I just don't trust Jalen Milroe in the offense to keep up with the amount of points that I just am basically giving LSU. Like, I know they're going to put up 35, and I don't know if Jalen Milroe is going to get there.
Yeah, my notes on this were just like I think a team gets to 40 points. So
Yeah.
I only need the other side to score 3 touchdowns. I like the over. I think one of these teams is scoring at least 40 points.
I agree.
LSU or Alabama, because those are the only two teams in the game. But I
Yes.
I like the over. But
And South Carolina is going to score 40 too, but they're not in this game. That's
yeah,
just
they're
a
not in this game, but they will
side
score
note.
40. We
Yeah.
had Jacksonville State this week, right?
Yes. I will
Yes.
be talking about it later.
And Spencer Rattler will be going in the first rounds in my brain.
Yes, he will. And if he's not, it's going to be the steal of the draft, whoever gets. I mean, that's what I keep saying as a Jets fan. I'm like, you wait for Spencer Rattler to drop. You get him in the second round. You draft him. You get 1 year of Aaron Rodgers. Go win the Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. Spencer Rattler is his backup, learning from a Hall of Famer. And then Aaron Rodgers retires, and Spencer Rattler steps in as your franchise quarterback. That's my dream come true. But
And then at least
um, yeah, at
at least two.
least.
At least two.
So, like I was saying, I think I agree with you. Like, if Alabama ends up putting up like 40 in this game, it wouldn't be shocking just because of what we've seen from LSU's defense at times this year. But if you look at the way Bama's played like the last couple of weeks, like they were down at halftime to Tennessee. They had to come back to win that game. They who's that against Arkansas? They like had a pretty commanding lead, and then just basically like something happened in the second half where they just like stopped playing, and Arkansas almost came back and won that game. Alabama only won by 3. The Texas A&M game, if it wasn't for some bad coaching decisions from Jimbo Fisher, Texas A&M easily could have won that game. Like, I'm just still not totally sold on this Alabama team. And even though they've been playing a lot better the last few weeks, I'm still, I don't know, something with this LSU team. I haven't been able to quit all year. This is my last chance. If they lose this game, then none of their games really matter the rest of the year. So this is my last chance to bet on LSU again. So I'm gonna do it, and I like the over too. I think I'm gonna bet the over as well. That kind
Yeah,
of saves me where if I know if LSU is gonna score, if Alabama can put up 40, then they win the game. Then I would at least win the over because I agree that they'll score.
yeah. I mean, LSU going for the perfect over season 8-0.
I know,
I
and
don't know if it's ever been done. I doubt it, but
I don't know if it has. It probably hasn't. And if there's a team to do it, it's them because their offense is ridiculous and their defense has been just terrifying at times. Like that Missouri game was ridiculous. The Missouri LSU game, it's one of the most ridiculous games I've ever watched. Um, the last game that we're going to talk about is Washington USC. Washington's a 3-point road favorite at USC, which I said I bet 2 game of the year lines, look ahead lines before the season started. The other one was Washington in this spot. I got Washington +6. So that has moved 9 points. So I nailed my 2 game of the year look ahead
double
line
CLP,
bets.
God.
And so it would be perfectly fitting for Alabama to win by 10 and USC to win by 7. So you can go ahead and lock in those alt lines now. But it's crazy looking at this game, Washington. I liked the Washington +6 game of the year line. I knew how good their offense was going to be. And I basically, in my mind, I was like, Washington and USC are going to be the exact same team. They're both going to be able to throw it for 400 yards against everybody and not really play any defense. So this game is like a total coin flip. So I'll take the +6. I didn't think that it would get this far, that Washington would be a 3-point road favorite. That's pretty insane and actually has me like more nervous than if they were 6-point underdogs. If they were
It
6-point
stinks.
dogs,
It stinks to high heavens 3 on the
I
road.
know.
It stinks.
If they were 6-point underdogs, like the look ahead line was, I would be like, put everything on the +6, bet the money line. They're going in, they're pulling off the upset. Like Penix is better than Caleb Williams. Washington's defense is better than USC's defense. Kalen DeBoer's a better coach than Lincoln Riley, which all three of those things are true in my mind. But the fact that they're 3-point favorites has me just like so messed up in the head. And I think I'm going to have to end up betting a little bit on USC +3, just because I think this game, the line just stinks. And basically my children's financial future is tied into this Washington team. So I really have no choice but to maybe put a little bit on USC +3. Maybe this game goes to overtime because of the 2-point conversion shootout. Washington wins by 2. USC covers the number. Maybe that's a dream scenario for me, but it just stinks.
Yeah, and this is a spot where it's like I hear people talking about it being a bounce back spot for Washington, and like they haven't lost a game yet. I know they like struggle a little bit on offense with Arizona State and
Stanford
and Stanford, and USC probably should have lost last week to Cal. I
definitely
think
should have
people
lost.
are counting out USC a little too early here. I mean, Caleb
I
Williams,
agree.
quarterback. I know Michael Penix is your guy, but like this game seemed to me like USC comes out and they score 49 points. I mean, Washington's gonna have to score 50 to beat them. I love the over. I gave it out as my mortal lock on Pick 'em, and I like USC just to cover the 3. I don't know if they win outright, but 3 is too much to cash out for a team that's not too far off in power rating from Washington, in my mind.
No, and I think it's the same thing that I thought when in August when I bet the look ahead line of +6. I was like, this game's going to come down to whoever has the ball last. Whoever scores last there's going to be no stops in this game. It's going to be up and down. It's going to be a track meet, and it's just going to be who has the ball last and gets the last score. And for me, hopefully it's Washington. And for if we're betting USC +3, hopefully Washington gets the ball down 1 or down 2, goes down and kicks a game-winning field goal and wins by 1 or 2. That would be perfect. But
This is a game that's going to get fucked by 2-point conversion attempts too. Like this line's going to
yeah,
get the first team that goes down and scores is probably going for 2.
yeah, they're going to be trying to steal points.
Yeah.
Both very aggressive offensive coaches that know the opposing defense is very inferior to what they have offensively. I agree. This game could get very weird. It's going to be very fun. I'm glad that this is a night game, and I'm glad Alabama LSU is a night game, but I'm also mad that they're on at the same time because it's by far maybe 2 of the best games of the year so far in college football, and they're going to be on at the same time. But it's yeah, going to be an awesome weekend between those games and JMU Georgia State. It's one of the great slates we've seen so
One of
far
the
this
greatest
season.
games we've ever seen in the history of college
Yeah,
football.
ever in college football. And that's why we have no idea where game day is headed because there are just so many options.
Yeah,
Uh,
shout out JMU, Jalen Green. I mean, most productive edge rusher in the entire country, but not listed on the NCAA website. Stats don't exist. So
that's crazy.
it's
Wait,
like this.
really? If you go to
Yeah,
NCAA.com, the
if
stats?
you go to NCAA.com, there's no JMU team stats, no JMU player stats.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
He
just
could be the
pretend they
first
don't
player since
exist.
Albert Dumerville to get 20 sacks in a season, and nobody will know.
And it will not be in any record books.
No.
It will not be in any history books. It will be erased from
Yeah.
history. But
They're
maybe
burning
they'll
the
get a play
books.
in the Pinstripe Bowl against
Yeah.
Syracuse at Yankee
Heineke Car
Stadium.
Care Bowl against Bowling Green.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Nice bonus. Um, but that's it for all the big games. The last thing we kind of had on the sheet is just to give out favorite bet or two. You already said your lock that you gave out on Pick 'em. Is that your favorite bet of the weekend here?
Yeah, over in that game, I don't think there's a single stop. Like I don't know if teams even like I don't think these teams are even going to stall out on 4th and 1, 4th and 2 and kick field goals. I think they're going for it. So I think you're going to get even if they get stalled, they're going to have short fields to work with of like
Yeah.
45, 40
No,
yards.
and these teams, even if these teams get, yeah, they're going for tons of fourth downs, which we saw fourth down variance go Washington's way in that game against Oregon. Oregon was 0 for 3, I think, on fourth down, and obviously had one to score the touchdown and then one at the end of the game that would have won the game for Oregon that they didn't get. So I think if variance is coming back, it's going to be USC converting a lot of fourth downs against Washington. So not going to be a lot of field goals. I think the only time we would see a field goal is like the last play of the game to win the game on a field goal. So yeah, I love that over too. I wrote down two games that weren't in the games we talked about that I really like, and one of them I thought would be fitting. One of them is South Carolina. We went into
I
this
fall for
season.
the trap every week. I fall for it.
They covered last week.
I know. I'm just saying, like I trick myself into money line every week. I'm like,
Oh well,
this is the week the Gamecocks get it done, but it never is.
I texted you last week when they went up 7-0 on Texas A&M, and then just and you were like, yes, let's go, and then I just didn't say anything the rest of the game because that was the high point of the game. But no, and in all seriousness, things have just really not broken their way. Your guy Juice Wells has been hurt basically the
Yeah.
entire year. He's barely played at all. They've had tons of injuries on the offensive line. They've really had injuries. Literally, the head coach broke his foot. Like it's just been a debacle of a season in terms of injuries, and they've only recovered one fumble the entire year, which is almost like statistically impossible. Like just nothing that could possibly go their way has broken their way. They have major issues for sure on the offensive line and in the secondary. Mainly are those two areas where they have major issues, but they've also just had nothing go for them. But I think this is the perfect get right spot. They've played by the power rating system I was looking at. They've played the hardest schedule in the country so far this year. And now they get Jacksonville State at home in the Gamecock Bowl, the only two FBS teams to have the Gamecock as their mascot, Jacksonville State and South Carolina. It is the beginning of Cockvember when South Carolina comes alive. We were talking about they beat Clemson and Tennessee in November last year. Cockvember is very real. And like I said, the two things that have burned South Carolina is the offensive line. Jacksonville State does not have the dudes to like get after them, even as a subpar SEC offensive line. Jacksonville State is not going to create problems, which means Spencer Rattler is actually going to be able to sit back and throw, which when he's had time to do that, he's been ridiculously good this year. He just has not been given that opportunity enough. And the other spot is the secondary. And Jacksonville State doesn't really throw the ball. They're not a great passing team. They're not going to be able to exploit their two weaknesses. I think South Carolina is going to come home in this game and just be like, oh, this is so nice. Like, this is unbelievable. Let's just try to put up a ridiculous number. And I think they could get an inspired effort. They're 2-6, 4 games to go. You got to win out to be bowl eligible. You got this game. You got Vanderbilt in Kentucky. And then you win those games. Then all of a sudden you're playing Clemson to become bowl eligible, which would be an unreal game. And Clemson to potentially not be bowl eligible in that game. It literally could be 2 5-6 teams playing for bowl eligibility in that spot, which would be insane. So
it would be cool to get a 5. If JMU does get the bowl extra spot, playing a 5-7 Clemson team in like the Car Care Bowl would be kind of cool. I'd be okay with that one.
If you're playing it, or if you're playing a 5-7 South Carolina team, then we got to book a trip.
Yeah.
We'll be going if that's the case.
Say the word, I'm there.
All right.
It's one of Wells' revenge game.
So I do like it. It's 15.5 is the number. I think it should be like 21. I think they win by 3 touchdowns.
I need to see.
comfortably.
I bet South Carolina wins preseason, so I'm praying for a push now. I need to win out the push, but I also bet Spencer Rattler, I believe, over passing yards, and I think I only need like 200 more.
That should be,
He's
yeah,
sling.
he's like in the top 15 in the country in passing.
Yeah,
Um,
2,600 and a half. So I need 500 more yards.
yeah, I mean, and in this game, he should put up like 350.
Yeah, so
Um,
it's
and yeah, you're in good shape. If he plays the last 4 games, he'll get you that number. And then the one other game, really quick, that I wrote down is Arkansas +6 at Florida. I bet Arkansas +6 and Arkansas money line. They're another team like South Carolina. They've just played such a brutally hard schedule that people are like, "Oh, this team sucks." It's like they really don't suck. It's just really, really hard to play in the SEC when you're one of these kind of middle of the road SEC teams. And they're another team that's had a really tough time with injuries. Their running back, Rocket Sanders, who's maybe the best running back in the country, in the top 5, top 10 for sure, has missed a lot of time, but he's expected to be back this week. Um, they're coming off a bye, so they've finally gotten everybody healthy, had a little bit of break from that brutal schedule. Florida's coming off the game against Georgia, where super emotional loss against their rivals, where it was like, oh, we could actually win the SEC if we upset Georgia in this game, and then they just got stomped out. So they're probably feeling bad. Arkansas finally had a bit of a break. They fired their offensive coordinator, Dan Enos, who was terrible and a laughing stock. So they've had 2 weeks with the bye to put some new things into the offense and try to figure things out. And their defense has actually been really good. So the defense isn't an issue. I think they'll cause a lot of problems for Graham Mertz and make him throw some Graham Mertz interceptions. And KJ Jefferson is the much better quarterback, and Arkansas is the better defense. So I think getting 6 points with them coming off a bye and Florida coming off the Georgia game, you have the better spot, the better quarterback, and the better defense catching 6 points. So I really like Arkansas.
I like Arkansas, and I like the over in that game too. I like the revamped offense going into Florida. My
And
other bet I love is Ohio State. I think it's time for some style points for the Buckeyes. I think
gotta be
this is
feeling good.
I think this is a beatdown.
Yeah, I believe it. They got to feel good, get number 1 in the rankings. Coming off the win against Wisconsin, that was a bit of a tricky game. Penn State before that was a bit of a tricky game. Now you're going to Piscataway and can just go throw the ball around and just throw jump balls to Marvin Harrison Jr. and nobody on Rutgers defense will be able to touch him. So
He's
yeah, I
probably
like
going to
that.
Blitnikoff, but it should be Malik Neighbors. I mean, he's been unbelievable. Marvin
Yeah.
Harrison's the Wisconsin receiver in all college football. The numbers Malik Neighbors is putting up is unbelievable.
Yeah, he has a much better quarterback throwing to him, more explosive offense for sure, which helps. But yeah, Malik Neighbors is out of control, and hopefully for my LSU bet and our over bets, he does that again. But this was like almost exactly an hour, just a couple minutes over an hour. So it was great. It flew by. We finally did it, and it was great. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, shout out to you for honoring JMU. It's JMU week.
I don't think anybody else with the slate this weekend is honoring JMU amongst the Washington, USC, Georgia, Missouri, LSU, Alabama, and on this podcast, it is JMU week. So you're welcome.
We appreciate all the love. Anyone that'll show us love, we appreciate it. And you are an ally with Juice Wells, so
Yes. No, we bought into this season together. JMU and South Carolina. We both supported each other all this way. So this weekend, we're betting both of them to cover the number this weekend. So hopefully they get it done and get it done for everybody that's listening. If you're listening, thanks for listening. And listen to the Barstool Pick Em Podcast. And that's it. Do you have anything else to plug or just?
I got nothing. Go Dukes.
Yeah, exactly.
Go
All
Dukes.
right. Go Dukes. Go Cox. Later.